Sometimes the most profound stories aren't born from words, but from silent gestures that change everything. When she arrived at the farm as payment for a debt, no one could have imagined that this woman, marked by abandonment, carried a gift that would transform not just one lonely life, but an entire community. This is the story of someone treated like discarded trash who became essential, because in the end, being seen with the right eyes is all we need to start over. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The light was still pale when the truck rumbled to a stop in the dirt yard, kicking up a fine cloud of red dust that mingled with the morning dew. The engine sputtered twice before dying completely, leaving only the distant crowing of roosters and the low moo of cows in the pasture. She was in the truck bed, huddled between sacks of corn and empty crates, knees pulled tight to her chest, eyes fixed on her own hands. Her nails were caked with dirt, her skin scratched by the rough edges of the wood, and her dress, a simple fabric, faded from countless washes, bore stains that told stories no one had bothered to hear. When the man who brought her knocked on the side of the truck bed, she didn't move. He knocked again, harder, and shouted something the wind carried away. Only then did she lift her eyes, not to him, but to the sky, as if asking permission to descend from this place she had never chosen to be. The farmer walked from the porch with slow steps, his boots marking the damp earth. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered with calloused hands, his face sun-baked and lined with wrinkles that seemed like furrows of hard work and loss. He said nothing when he saw the girl. He merely exchanged a brief glance with the other man, who was laughing nervously, explaining something about settling accounts and "she's no trouble." She climbed down alone, holding onto the side of the truck to keep from stumbling. Her bare feet touched the cool ground, and she closed her eyes for a moment like someone saying goodbye to something. There was no suitcase, no blanket, not even a bundle. Just her, standing in that strange yard, her heart pounding so hard she felt it in her temples. The truck driver extended a crumpled paper to the farmer. He took it, read it quickly, and his face didn't change. He merely nodded and tucked the paper into his shirt pocket. The other man got back into the truck, started the engine, and drove off without looking back. The dust rose again, now carried by the wind, and then everything fell silent. She remained standing, hands clasped in front of her, eyes downcast. She expected orders, expected shouts, expected the worst, because that's what always came. But the farmer simply stepped aside and gestured toward the house. She looked at him, confused, and he repeated the gesture, this time more calmly. When she didn't move, he walked to the porch, opened the door, and waited. She understood then that it was an invitation. Slowly, as if fearing the ground might open up at any moment, she began to walk. The house was simple but clean. It smelled of old wood, reheated coffee, and something sweet, perhaps guava paste forgotten in the pot. There was a sturdy wooden table in the center of the kitchen, 3 mismatched chairs, a wood-burning stove that still let out a thin wisp of smoke. The walls were exposed brick, decorated only by an old calendar and a small crucifix. He pointed to a chair. She sat down slowly, hands in her lap, her body tense like a guitar string. He poured water into a thick glass tumbler and placed it on the table in front of her. She looked at the glass, then at him, as if it were a trick, but he merely nodded and returned to the stove. She drank the water slowly, feeling the coolness slide down her throat, awakening something inside her that had been dormant for days. When she finished, he had already placed a bowl of stew on the table, beans with chunks of meat, chopped collard greens, the aroma of garlic and salt. She picked up the spoon, but her hands trembled so much the stew almost spilled. He said nothing. He simply continued frying some eggs, as if none of this were extraordinary, as if receiving an unknown woman in exchange for a debt were part of the routine. But it wasn't, and she knew it. Because in her entire life, no one had ever served her like this. without demanding, without humiliating, without expecting anything in return. She ate slowly, each spoonful feeling like a small miracle. And when she finished, when she finally raised her eyes, she met his, not with suspicion, not with lust, but with something she couldn't name. Perhaps it was respect, perhaps it was shared weariness, or perhaps it was just the beginning of something that didn't yet have a name. She woke before the sun, as she always had her whole life. She didn't know exactly where she was. The faint light coming through the window didn't tell her much, but she remembered the clean mattress, the blanket that smelled of coconut soap, the door that no one had locked from the outside. She got up in silence, folded the blanket carefully, and left the small room the farmer had indicated the night before. The house was quiet, but not empty. There was a fire going in the wood-burning stove, water boiling in a black kettle, and the unmistakable smell of brewed coffee. He was sitting at the table reading an old notebook, his glasses slipping down his nose. He looked up when he saw her, gave a brief nod, a simple greeting, and went back to reading. She stood in the doorway, unsure if she should approach or wait for orders. He noticed her hesitation. He closed the notebook, stood up, and took another mug from the cupboard. He filled it with coffee, added sugar without asking, and placed it on the table opposite him. Then he pointed to the chair. She sat down. She picked up the mug with both hands, feeling the warmth through the porcelain, and took a sip. It was strong, just the right amount of bitter, and she closed her eyes for a moment, savoring that small comfort. When she opened her eyes, he was writing something on a piece of paper. He turned it to her. "Good morning. Are you all right?" She read it, blinked in surprise, and nodded slowly. No one had ever written anything to her. No one had ever asked if she was all right. He wrote again. "Do you need clothes? I have some put away. They were my wife's." She hesitated, but then nodded yes. He stood up, went to a wooden chest in the corner of the room, and returned with a light blue dress, mended at the shoulder but still pretty, and a wool shawl. She took the pieces, felt the fabric between her fingers, and something stirred within her, gratitude mixed with shame at accepting. He pointed to the bedroom. She understood, stood up, and went back to change. The dress fit almost perfectly. When she came out, he was already at the door, hat on his head and bucket in his hand. He gestured outside. She followed him. The yard was alive now. Chickens pecked around the barn, a scrawny dog stretched in the sun, and cows grazed peacefully beyond the fence. The sky was a clean, cloudless blue, and the air smelled of wet grass and fresh manure. He led her to the pen, showed her where the feed was, how to open the gate, where to get water. He didn't speak. He pointed, demonstrated, waited for her to repeat, and she repeated with almost religious attention, as if each gesture were a sacred lesson. When he picked up a pail and began to milk a cow, she watched his every move, the position of his hands, the firmness of his touch, the steady rhythm. He noticed her interest, finished milking, and offered her the stool. She sat, positioned the pail, touched the udder with care. The cow shifted uneasy. She stopped, looked at the farmer, and he made a gesture. Easy. She took a deep breath, tried again, this time with more confidence. The milk began to stream, thin at first, then stronger, and she smiled. He didn't smile back, but something in his face softened. They spent the whole morning like that, in productive silence, learning each other's language. When the sun was high and the heat pressed down, he led her back to the kitchen, served a simple lunch, rice, beans, cooked squash, and they ate together, unhurried. Afterward, he wrote again, "You can stay here. You don't need to be afraid." She read it, reread it, and felt something crack inside her chest. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was just the first fissure in the armor she had built around her heart. She picked up the pencil, trembling, and wrote underneath, "Thank you." He read it, folded the paper, and put it in his pocket. He said nothing more. He didn't need to. The week followed a quiet, almost hypnotic pace. She woke before him, started the fire, put the water on to boil. He'd come down and find the coffee ready, the table wiped clean, and always a small gesture she'd left, a sprig of mint in his mug, a neatly folded cloth. They worked together during the day, but always with a respectful distance. He taught, she learned. He mended fences, she held the boards. He planted, she watered. There were no demands, no rush. It was as if they both knew that any sudden movement could shatter that fragile balance. But shame still weighed on her, especially when they went into town. The first time he took her to the market, she felt eyes clinging to her skin like sticky honey. Women whispered behind counters. Men made low comments she couldn't hear, but guessed from knowing laughter. An old woman in a black shawl with a rosary around her neck stopped in front of them and said something directly to the farmer. He replied firmly but calmly. The woman shook her head, disapproving, and walked away. She lowered her eyes, her hands tightening on the handle of the basket she carried. She wanted to disappear. On the way back, inside the wagon, she wrote on a paper she kept in her pocket, "Why do you defend me?" He read it, but didn't answer right away. He simply guided the horses in silence, his eyes fixed on the dirt road. When they reached the farm, he finally wrote, "Because you don't deserve to be treated like that." She read it, and her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. She no longer knew how. The days accumulated, and with them came small revelations. He discovered she loved flowers. She always stopped to touch the petals when they passed the overgrown garden at the back of the house. So, one morning, he cleared the bed, pulled out the weeds and planted sunflower seeds. She discovered he didn't sleep well. She heard, or rather felt, his footsteps through the house in the dead of night, the creak of the rocking chair on the porch. So she began to leave chamomile tea ready, in a thermos, always in the same spot. They were silent gestures, but eloquent. Still, she carried a secret she didn't know how to reveal. A secret that wasn't just about her deafness, but about something more. Something others had coveted, feared, used. She understood the animals in a way no one else could. She felt their pain before symptoms manifested. She knew when a cow was about to calve, when a horse was sick, when the dog was hiding a wound. It was as if the silence around her had sharpened another sense, one that connected her to the heart of living things. But she had never told anyone, because the last time someone knew, she had been exploited, used, sold, and she was afraid that if he found out, he would see her as a tool. One afternoon, under a heavy sky, as they were storing hay in the barn, he stopped suddenly and looked at her. He made a simple gesture. He pointed to her heart, then to his. She frowned, confused. He repeated it, more slowly. Then he wrote in the dust on the ground with a stick, "You are like me." She read it, and something tightened in her chest. Like him? How? He wrote again, "You are alone too. You are afraid too." She swallowed hard, nodded slowly. He moved closer, not too close, just enough for her to feel his presence as something solid, real. And then he made a promise he etched into the ground. "Here you are safe." She read it, reread it. And for the first time in a long time, she believed. The farm routine took on its own rhythm, like the slow breath of someone finally able to sleep in peace. She learned to knead bread, her hands sinking into the warm dough, the smell of yeast filling the kitchen. He learned to wait for her to finish before starting the coffee, because he realized she liked to do it alone, in her own time, without haste. A language was forming between them, made of brief glances, precise gestures, and short notes left on the table. When he needed her to feed the chickens, he drew an egg and a bird. When she wanted to know if he would be back late, she drew the setting sun. They were simple codes, but they worked better than many conversations. One foggy morning, he took her to the abandoned orchard at the back of the property. The trees were twisted, the branches dry, the ground covered in dead leaves. She looked around, confused, until he pointed to a single tree. an old pear tree, still alive, with timid buds appearing among the branches. He wrote, "My wife planted it. I haven't tended it for 5 years." She read it, touched the rough trunk of the tree, felt the life pulsing beneath. She looked at him and nodded. "We can take care of it together." He agreed. They spent the whole afternoon clearing around it, pulling weeds, watering the parched earth. As the sun began to set, she picked a small sprout growing crookedly and carefully tied it to a wooden stake. He watched quiet, and something in his face changed. As if seeing the tree being cared for again, a part of him also began to heal. The animals began to follow her. The dog, who had previously barely approached strangers, now slept at the feet of the chair where she sewed. The chickens pecked around her when she scattered corn. And the cows were the most impressive. When she entered the barn, they all calmed down as if her presence were a balm. He noticed but didn't comment. He just watched, intrigued, as she petted the muzzle of a calf no one could tame. The calf let itself be touched, docile, almost drowsy. One time she found a small bird fallen near the porch, a fledgling with a broken wing, still alive but weak. She picked it up carefully, made a splint with thin twigs and a piece of cloth, and left the bird in a box by the stove to keep warm. He saw it all but didn't interfere. He just brought worms for her to feed the chick. 3 days later, the bird started chirping. A week later, it was flapping its good wing. And then, on a clear morning, she took it outside and let it go. It flew crookedly at first, faltering, but then gained altitude and disappeared among the trees. She smiled, and he smiled too. The community continued to watch, of course. At Sunday Mass, which he attended alone, questions came disguised as pleasantries. "And the young lady with you, Mr. Thomas? She's helping with the chores. But is she staying? If she wants to?" Eyebrows rose, glances were exchanged, but he offered no further explanations. He just put on his hat and left. At home, she waited on the porch, always with lunch ready. And when he returned, he always brought something small, a sweet roll, a piece of cheese, once a blue ribbon he'd bought at the market. She'd take it, surprised, and keep it carefully, like someone treasuring a keepsake. They weren't dating, they weren't boss and employee. They were two people who had found in each other something the world had denied them for too long: dignity. And that silently was beginning to transform into something more. The sky changed color in the mid-afternoon, from blue to leaden gray, heavy and low like a ceiling about to collapse. The wind began to blow stronger, carrying the smell of rain mixed with earth and fear. She felt the change before she saw it, that old premonition that always warned her when something was wrong. She ran to the barn. The cows were restless, milling about, mooing low. One of them, the oldest, the one with the clouded eye, was trembling in her legs, her breathing heavy, ragged. She approached slowly, extended her hand, and touched the animal's neck. She felt the excessive heat, the racing pulse, the tension in the muscles. Something was very wrong. He arrived right behind her, coming from the pasture, and stopped when he saw the scene. She pointed to the cow, then to her own belly, made a gesture of pain. He understood immediately. The cow was sick, perhaps poisoned by a plant, or maybe starting a difficult labor. He entered the barn, examined the animal, but the cow agitated more, her eyes wide with panic. He tried to calm her, but she backed away, bumping against the fence. Then he looked at the young woman, and she understood the silent request. She went in. She knelt on the damp earth, ignoring the rain that was beginning to fall lightly, and placed her hands on the animal's flank. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then, with a calm that came from somewhere deep within, she began to make slow movements, almost like a dance, pressing specific points, following an instinct she couldn't explain. The cow stopped trembling. He watched, stunned, as she continued, her hands firm, her face concentrated, completely oblivious to the storm that was now raging. She palpated the animal's belly, felt something, and made a gesture. "I need hot water." towels, a clean knife. He ran. He returned with everything, soaked, and found the young woman still there, kneeling, her hand inside the animal, helping to reposition the calf that was coming backward. The rain hammered the tin roof, thunder exploded in the sky, but there in that barn, there was only concentration and determination. After what felt like hours, but was only minutes, the calf was born, slippery, weak, but alive. She pulled it out, cleared its nostrils, rubbed its small body with a cloth until it began to breathe on its own. The cow mooed, exhausted but relieved, and began to lick her calf. She stepped away, her hands dirty with blood and amniotic fluid, her dress soaked, her hair plastered to her face, and when she finally lifted her eyes, she met his, wide, incredulous, filled with something she couldn't name. He extended his hand. She accepted. He helped her up, and for a moment they stood there, in the rain, looking at each other. Inside the house, he lit the fire while she washed her hands in the basin. He brought a blanket, placed it over her shoulders, and made hot tea. She drank it slowly, still trembling, not from cold, but from the adrenaline rush. He picked up a notebook. He wrote, "How did you do that?" She hesitated. Then she wrote, her hand shaking. "I always knew, since I was a child. The animals, I feel what they feel. That's why they used me. That's why they sold me." He read it again. And then he did something she didn't expect. He took the paper, folded it carefully, and put it in his pocket as if it were precious. He wrote again, "You are not a tool. You are a gift from God." She read it, and for the first time in her life, she cried in front of someone. She cried from relief, from fear, from hope. And he, not quite knowing what to do, just stayed there beside her, a solid presence in the middle of the storm. The news spread quickly, faster than the wind carrying dry leaves down the road, faster than the gossip that ran between the tables at the general store. The young woman living with Mr. Thomas had saved a cow and its calf during a storm. With her own hands, they said, almost like a miracle. The first reactions were of cautious curiosity. Some farmers appeared at the property asking for help with sick animals. She attended to everyone, always with Thomas by her side, translating when necessary, protecting her when the stares lingered too long. But not everyone saw kindness in it. Mrs. Eulalia, the matriarch of the most traditional family in town, was clear in her disapproval. Leaving Mass, surrounded by other ladies in black with long rosaries, she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "A young woman who appears out of nowhere with no family, no name, living with a widower, and now they say she has powers. That's not from God, my people. That's something the church should investigate." A murmur grew. Some people agreed. Others shook their heads, uncomfortable, but without the courage to disagree. Thomas, who heard everything from the back of the square, clenched his fists inside his pockets, but he didn't retort. Not there, not then. He just returned home, tense, his jaw set. She noticed the change in him. She saw the way he looked away during dinner, how he idly stirred his food, the silence heavier than usual. She wrote, "Did something happen?" He hesitated. Then he wrote, "People are talking." She looked down. She'd expected it. She always expected it. "Do you want me to leave?" He snatched the paper with such force he nearly tore it. He wrote quickly, the letters large and firm. "No." She looked up, surprised. He continued writing, "You're not going anywhere. This is your home now." She read it, reread it, and felt her chest tighten. She wanted to believe him, but she was afraid the pressure from the town would be stronger than his will. The next week, the pressure escalated. The pastor showed up at the farm, an elderly man in a worn cassock and tired eyes. He asked to speak with Tomas, alone. They talked on the porch while she stayed inside, pretending to sew, but feeling every fiber of her body tense. When the pastor left, Tomas came in, his face grim. He tossed his hat on the table and sat down heavily. She waited. He wrote, "They said you need to confess. that your gifts need to be examined, that it's not natural for a woman to have this kind of knowledge. She felt her blood run cold. And you? What do you think? He looked up, and there was fire in his eyes, a quiet but burning fire. I think you saved a life, and that's holier than anything they do in church. She felt her eyes sting, but this time she didn't cry. She just took his hand, the first time she'd touched him of her own volition, and squeezed it tight. But the pressure continued. Mrs. Eulalia went further. She sent a letter to the county judge alleging moral irregularity and risk to public order. She demanded that the situation be investigated, that the young woman be identified, and, if necessary, removed. When the court officer appeared at the farm with a letterhead and a summons, she knew. The secret was no longer just hers. It was public now, and the world, as always, didn't forgive those who were different. She looked at Tomas and saw in him the same determination she'd felt when she saved the calf. He took the paper from the officer's hands, read it, and said in a firm voice, "Tell the judge we'll be there, together." And it was at that moment, in that small declaration, that she understood. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't just protecting her, someone was fighting with her. The hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday at the small county courthouse, a red brick building with tall windows and a bell in the tower that chimed the hours. They went by wagon, leaving before dawn, the dirt road still damp with dew. She wore the blue dress, washed and pressed with care. Tomas wore his Sunday best, twill pants, a white shirt, suspenders. Both in silence, but side by side, their shoulders almost touching. When they arrived, the town square was already bustling. There were onlookers on the sidewalks, whispers at the doorways of the shops. Mrs. Eulalia was there, surrounded by her allies, her rosary between her fingers like a weapon. They got down from the wagon. She felt her legs tremble, but forced them to walk. Tomas walked beside her, his hand lightly brushing her back. A small gesture, but one that said, "I am here." Inside the courtroom, the judge was a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper mustache and gold-rimmed glasses. He read the document aloud, unhurriedly, while Mrs. Eulalia and two other witnesses waited on the other side. The accusations were clear: irregular cohabitation, possible exploitation, and, most seriously, practices that defied the natural order of things. Mrs. Eulalia had even subtly suggested that witchcraft was involved. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Are you accusing the young woman of sorcery?" Mrs. Eulalia hesitated. "Not exactly, Your Honor, but it's not natural. A woman who understands animals like that, who heals without being a veterinarian, who lives with a man without being married, that's not right." The judge turned to Tomas. "Do you have anything to say?" Tomas stood up. He took a deep breath. "I do, sir. This young woman arrived at my ranch because of a debt that wasn't hers. She was handed over like an object. I took her in because it was the right thing to do. She works, she helps, she cares for the animals better than any vet I've ever seen. And there's nothing immoral about it. She has her room, I have mine. We are just two people trying to live with dignity." Mrs. Eulalia huffed. "But the girl is deaf, Your Honor. How can she care for animals? How can she live alone?" That's when she stood up. The judge looked at her, surprised. Tomas did too. But she was already on her feet, firm, her eyes fixed on Mrs. Eulalia. She took a piece of paper and a pen from the clerk's desk and wrote in large, clear letters, "I hear what the animals' hearts say. I hear what people pretend not to feel. And I know you are afraid, not of me, but of everything you can't control." The clerk read it aloud. The silence that followed was dense, almost palpable. Mrs. Eulalia turned pale. The judge clasped his hands, deep in thought. "The young woman is right, Mrs. Eulalia. Fear is no justification for persecution." He turned to Tomas and the young woman. "However, there is a legal issue. The young woman has no identification, no record. Technically, she is here illegally. I could order her to be placed in a shelter until her situation is resolved. She felt the ground disappear beneath her. She gripped the edge of the table. Tomas took a step forward. "Then I will resolve it now, sir." The judge raised his eyebrows. "How?" Tomas turned to her. He took her hand in front of everyone without hesitation. "Marry me. Today, if you'll allow it, sir. That way she will have a name, a record, legal protection, and no one will be able to take her from where she has chosen to be." The silence exploded into murmurs. Mrs. Eulalia stood up, indignant. The judge banged his gavel. "Order!" He looked at the young woman. Mister, Tomas is asking for your hand in marriage. Do you accept?" She looked at Tomas. She saw in his eyes everything she needed to know. It wasn't pity. It wasn't obligation. It was a choice. She nodded. The judge smiled for the first time. Then, let the certificate be prepared. The wedding was performed right there in the courtroom, with 2 witnesses summoned in a hurry, the clerk and the janitor. There were no flowers, no music, no party. Just a silent yes from her, a firm handshake from Tomas, and a trembling signature on an official document. When they left, she had a last name. She had a legitimate home. She had, for the first time, something no one could take away, an identity. Mrs. Eulalia was still at the courthouse door, furious but powerless. She walked past her with her head held high, her fingers intertwined with Tomas's, and felt something new growing in her chest. Courage. On the way back, he stopped the cart near a creek. He got down and offered her his hand to help her down. They walked to the bank, where the water ran clear over the stones, and he picked up a smooth, white stone. He made a hole in it with a nail he carried in his pocket and threaded a leather cord through it. He placed it around her neck. She touched the stone, confused. He wrote on the palm of her hand with his finger, "A poor man's ring." "But it's from the heart." She smiled, not a shy smile, but a full, radiant one that lit up her entire face. And then she did something that surprised them both. She hugged him. He tensed for a moment, then relaxed and returned the embrace, his strong arms around her, his chin resting on top of her head. They stayed like that in silence, listening to the water and the wind until the sun began to set. Back at the ranch, the routine changed, but not drastically. They still had separate rooms. They still ate together in respectful silence. But now there was something new. Small gestures. His hand brushing her shoulder as he passed, her fingers adjusting his collar before he left. And above all, there was trust. She began helping more neighbors. The news of the wedding, ironically, calmed things down. "She's Tomas's wife now," they'd say. "Everything's fine now." As if a piece of paper changed who she was. But she didn't mind. She used that paper as a shield and continued doing what she knew, caring. One day, a man appeared with a mare who couldn't give birth. She went to his property, accompanied by Tomas, and spent the entire night helping the animal. When the foal was finally born, healthy and strong, the man offered payment. She refused. She only asked, in writing, that he treat his animals with more care. The man agreed, ashamed. And as they left, he said to his wife, "That young woman is blessed." His wife agreed, but not everything was resolved. One afternoon, Tomas received a visit from an unknown man, tall, thin, dressed in city clothes, with a calculating gaze. He introduced himself as a representative of the young woman's former owner, here to collect the debt again. The debt was for 4 years of labor, the man said. She only worked for 3 months. The agreement wasn't fulfilled. Tomas crossed his arms. "She's no longer your responsibility. She's my wife." The man smiled, a cold smile. "Marriage doesn't erase debt, friend. Either she comes back or you pay what's missing, in cash." Tomas fell silent. He didn't have that kind of money. The ranch was barely making ends meet. The man left a paper on the table. "You have 1 week. After that, I'll be back with the sheriff." And he left. She, who had been watching everything from the window, rushed in. She grabbed the paper, read it, and felt her world crumble again. Desperate, she wrote, "I'll go back. I don't want you to lose everything because of me." He took the paper, crumpled it, and threw it away. He wrote again firmly, "We'll figure this out, together. You're not going anywhere." And for the first time, she saw in his eyes not just kindness, but something deeper, devotion. Tomas didn't sleep that night. She heard him, or rather felt him, walking through the house, the creak of the floorboards echoing in her chest like a drum. In the pre-dawn hours, she went downstairs and found him sitting at the table, surrounded by old papers, notes, yellowed receipts. He looked up when he saw her, and there was weariness in his eyes, but also something unyielding, determination. She sat beside him. He pushed the papers toward her. They were ranch documents, sales records, some savings counted and recounted. It wasn't enough. It wasn't even close to the amount the man demanded. She wrote, "We'll sell something, the wagon, some cows. I'll work. We'll scrape it together." He shook his head. "It's not fair. You're not merchandise. I won't treat you like that." She insisted. "But it's my debt." He took her hand, his grip firm. "No, it's the debt of the one who sold you, not yours." And then he had an idea. The next morning, they went to town. First, they sought out the priest. Tomas explained the situation, the fabricated debt, the injustice, the threat. The priest listened, his hands clasped, his face serious. "This is immoral," the priest said. "Debts aren't paid with people. I'll write a letter to the judge. I don't know if it will help, but it's what I can do." Afterward, they went to the local veterinarian, who already knew her work. He also offered to testify. "She's saved more animals in these months than I have in years," he said. "And she didn't charge anything. That has to count for something." Then Tomas did something she didn't expect. He went to Mrs. Eulalia's house. The old lady opened the door, surprised and suspicious. "What do you want here, Tomas?" He took off his hat. "I need help, Mrs. Eulalia." She frowned. "Me?" He explained the situation. She listened, impassive, until the end. Then she sighed. "Why would I help the girl? I was the one who raised questions against her." Tomas looked her in the eyes. "Because you are fair, and you know this isn't right." Mrs. Eulalia was silent. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I'll speak with the judge." On the appointed day, the man from town returned, accompanied by a clerk and a deputy. He knocked on the door with arrogance, expecting to find resignation. He found resistance. Tomas stood on the porch, surrounded by neighbors. The priest was there, the veterinarian, Mrs. Eulalia, and even some farmers who had been helped by the young woman. The man stopped, suspicious. "I've come to collect what's mine." Tomas stepped forward. "Nothing here is yours, and we have proof of that." The priest handed over the letter. The veterinarian, a deposition. Mrs. Eulalia, surprisingly, produced a document proving that the original debt had never been legal. It was a contract of exploitation, not labor. The clerk read everything, his face growing more serious with each word. He turned to the man from town. "This won't hold up in court. You are committing extortion." The man paled. "But I have rights." "You don't," said the deputy, who had remained silent until then. "And if you keep pushing this, you'll be arrested." The man looked around, saw he was cornered, and backed down. He climbed into his wagon and left, muttering empty threats. When the dust settled, Tomas turned to the neighbors. He said nothing. He just nodded in gratitude. She came out from inside the house trembling and saw everything. The people who had looked at her with suspicion now waved. Some even smiled. It wasn't complete acceptance, but it was a start. And when Tomas extended his hand to her in front of everyone, she didn't hesitate. She took it. Autumn arrived slowly, painting the world in gold and rust. The trees in the orchard finally bore fruit, small but sweet. The pear tree she and Tomas had cared for together was laden, its branches bent under the weight of ripe pears. She was picking the fruit on a clear morning, the warm sun on her back, the dog lying at her feet. Tomas was fixing the fence near the barn, but he would stop every now and then to look at her, a half smile playing on his lips. The house had changed. Not in structure, it was still the same brick and wood house, but in spirit. There were flowers in the windows now. There was laughter. There was, above all, peace. One afternoon she was sewing on the porch when she saw a woman approaching down the path, a child by the hand. It was one of the neighbors, shy, who had never spoken to her before. The woman hesitated but finally came closer. "Sorry to bother you," she said, looking at the ground. "But they said you understand. Children who don't talk." She frowned, confused. The woman pushed the little girl forward, a girl of about 5 with large, frightened eyes. "She hasn't spoken since her father left. I've taken her to a healer, to the doctor. No one can make her talk." She looked at the child. She knelt down in front of her slowly and made a simple gesture. She opened her hands, as if offering something. The girl looked suspicious, but then placed her small hands in hers. They stayed like that in silence, for long minutes. Then the young woman took a piece of paper and drew a heart. She showed it to the girl. The girl picked up the pencil hesitantly and drew another, smaller heart inside the first one. The mother began to cry. "She hasn't done anything for months." She looked up at the mother and wrote, "She'll speak when she's ready. She just needs to know she's heard." The mother read it, nodded, and thanked her, tears in her eyes. Before leaving, she turned back. "Thank you, from the bottom of my heart." That evening, after dinner, Thomas and she sat on the porch, as they always did. He had learned a few simple signs, gestures she'd taught him slowly, patiently, and now they could talk without paper. He pointed to the pear tree, then to her, and made the sign for grow. She understood. The tree grew. So did you. She smiled and made the sign for us. He nodded in agreement. They sat in silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and orange. Then he did something he'd never done before. He took her hand and intertwined their fingers, unhurriedly, without fear. She squeezed back, and then, in that shared quiet, she realized something. She didn't need words to know she was loved. She didn't need sound to understand that she finally had a home. Because home wasn't a place where they accepted you despite who you were. Home was where they chose you because of who you were. Months later, when winter brought the first frost, she discovered she was pregnant. She wrote him a simple note left on the table. "We're having a baby." He read it, then read it again, and when he finally looked up, his eyes were moist. He hugged her tightly, his head resting on her shoulder, and she felt his contained sobs, the joy overflowing in silence. They weren't perfect. Life wasn't easy, but they were, finally, complete. And the following spring, when the baby was born, a little girl with dark eyes and a strong cry, they named her Hope, because that was exactly what she had brought into that house, into that land, into those two hearts that had learned together to listen beyond sound. Life went on, as it always does. There was work, there was weariness, there were tough days, but there was also laughter. There were hugs, there were mornings with hot coffee and afternoons with warm sun on the porch. And when little Hope grew and asked her mother, her small hands making signs, "How did Daddy and you meet?" she smiled and answered, also in signs. God wrote us for each other, and we just needed the courage to read it. This is home now. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in their place? Comment and share with someone special.